Welcome into our football happy hour. Amanda Guerra, Brady Quinn, Danny Kanell here. Week 1 of the NFL nearly done. So far, we've seen both Super Bowl teams lose. Also a handful of injuries, including Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott. The Cowboys now in their season opener, a loss to the Bucs. Dak hurting his thumb on his throwing hand in a play in the fourth quarter there with Shaq Barrett. Now, Dak initially saying, look, I thought I jammed my thumb, but x-rays later revealing it was a fracture. Dak undergoing surgery today. After that, the Cowboys will set a specific timeline for his return. Welcome back in. Brady and Danny here. Brady, we'll start with you. Obviously, a big blow to the Cowboys. We'll talk about Cooper Rush here in a second if they move on from him. But just to begin with, the impact this is going to have on the Cowboys this season.
Well, it's huge. I mean, look, at least the one thing you can take away from that game is I thought they actually ran the football okay. I maybe should have tried to run the football more. We thought the offensive line was going to be some issues. Look, Tampa's a tough team out of the gates to start off with, considering how good their defensive front is. But I think Dallas is at least going to be okay up front. We know their defense is going to be solid and pretty salty. It's more about the passing game. And you kind of, when you were watching Dak out there, it never felt like they could find a rhythm. Credit the Tampa Bay Bucs defense and Todd Bowles and their scheme, but the truth of the matter is, some of that was Dak Prescott. He didn't get off to a great start. Now you lose him, you have Cooper Rush come in, and for a significant period of time, it's going to impact any chance of not only winning the division, but trying to get to the playoffs too as a wild card team. So they've got to do something. They have to do something now. I don't feel overly optimistic, at least at this point now, looking at the Dallas Cowboys looking forward there, Danny.
Danny,
yeah, this is it's a devastating blow, especially for a team that felt like they were going to contend for the division title. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of teams got off to rough starts, and you can shake off a bad start, right? You can just come back in the next week. But injuries are something that can derail a season, and that's sure what it feels like this Dak Prescott is going to do to this Cowboys season once again, because it happened a couple years ago too. But I just look at this team, and I think you have to look at the roster the way it's constructed, especially at backup quarterback, and the lack of a real viable option of somebody to come in. And some of this blame has to fall at the feet of Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones for constructing a roster and taking a massive risk with not having a viable backup behind them. We'll talk about some option they can sign. But I think this is one of those things, you know, to be good in the NFL, to win a Super Bowl, you got to get lucky, and part of that is good bounces, but it's also health. And we've seen a couple teams devastating injuries early, but none more so than losing your quarterback. And while it feels like, okay, let's not overreact, this is a significant loss because of the drop off and who's coming in when Dak is out.
We had Pete Prisco, Rick Spielman on this morning, and both sort of agreed that the Cowboys didn't put themselves in a good position if this were to happen, and now it has happened. So it seems like you do agree with that, at least that point there.
100%. I mean, this is one of those things when you're combing through the roster and looking at, okay, where are the weaknesses on the Dallas Cowboys depth chart? It was the quarterback position behind Dak, and this is a guy that had already been through injuries before. He's a good athlete, so he will take off from time to time, which makes him more susceptible to having those sorts of issues. So that was already a concern coming into it. I think the other concern is for Mike McCarthy's job security. I mean, let's be real. After the way things ended last year, and now having this happen, and granted, it's not on him for their depth chart and what the roster looks like. That is on Stephen Jones. It's Jerry Jones, as Danny just said. You still have to wonder, though, if the Jones family doesn't look at Mike McCarthy and said, okay, that's why we pay you the big bucks. This is why you're our head coach. You have to find a way of overcoming, whether that's with Cooper Rush or whoever else we would potentially bring in.
So, Danny, let's talk about some of that. And I will circle back to Mike McCarthy because we do want to talk about that. But when it comes to Cooper Rush, what do the Cowboys do? Do you have to go out there and start looking for someone else, or do you just try to stick with him right now?
They're probably going to have to sign somebody just for depth alone. But even if you sign somebody, I mean, Brady knows this, it's going to take time to get somebody acclimated. There are some guys, and we'll toss around some names, that might have familiarity with the system, but still it takes time. Let me just put this into perspective, too, because August 31st, the Dallas Cowboys cut both Cooper Rush and Will Grier, their second and third string quarterbacks, as a little roster manipulation, and then signed them back on the practice squad before elevating Cooper Rush to the second team quarterback spot. That means they cleared waivers. Not one other team in the NFL thought either one of those quarterbacks was good enough to even take a flyer on. That's where I think this is a massive risk that they took, and maybe a bit of arrogance, because as Brady noted, Dak's been banged up. He has not stayed healthy the last couple years, and for them to just egregiously overlook this, and maybe they think like, oh, we've got another Tony Romo on our hands, like some complete unknown who all of a sudden is going to come out there and be the savior, or at least be a great, competent backup, is an extreme bit of arrogance on their behalf, thinking like, oh, we found somebody who nobody else sees value in. Maybe they're right. And if they are, I will be the first one to step up and say, I was wrong, you were right. But when was the last time that you've heard Jerry Jones or Stephen Jones step up and say, no, this is on me, this is our fault? They won't, and you're right about Mike McCarthy. He's probably going to take the fall if this season does implode.
They were already blaming him after, and some of the post-game and the comments that we've heard today from Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones, talking about the offense, talking about they need to be able to do more. I mean, this is really setting up the groundwork for what will potentially be a Mike McCarthy dismissal after this season. I don't know if that means they're going to elevate Dan Quinn, who's done a tremendous job as their defensive coordinator, or if there's that guy who's out in LA right now working for a network named Sean Payton, who might have his eyes set on this position. But however you want to look at it, it already seems like this is set up for Mike McCarthy to fail. And it's a little bit frustrating considering it's a guy who's won a Super Bowl, and really not even 2 years into it, you can already kind of see the writing on the wall.
Starting 0-1 for the third time as his head coach. There is the Cowboys. All right, let's talk names, potential names that the Cowboys could be after to take over this quarterback position now.
I mean, the first one to me is Jimmy G. The reality is the restructured contract was done for a reason with a no-trade clause, and a lot of people confuse what a no-trade clause means. It doesn't mean you can't be traded. It just means you have the right of refusal. So if the San Francisco 49ers want to trade you, you could say, nope, I don't want to go to that team. Or actually, I do want to go to that team. So I will waive it, and I'll make sure I go to the Dallas Cowboys in that case.
Are they attractive to him?
They have to be attractive to any quarterback who's looking for an opportunity to go with a talented roster and a chance to win a division right now. That would be the Dallas Cowboys. The problem is, I don't know that San Francisco's going to want to entertain this because of what we saw week one versus the Chicago Bears. Now, it was on the road, terrible weather. I don't want to put a ton into that for Trey Lance's start this year to start off the season. But the reality is, maybe it's one of the reasons why they kept Jimmy Garoppolo around, because they thought if there are some growing plays with Trey Lance, you can turn it over to Jimmy G, the guy who's helped you get to 2 NFC Championship games and one of those years going to the Super Bowl. So Jimmy G's the first that comes to my list. I just don't know if the 49ers are going to want to entertain that.
Danny, what are some names you're thinking of right now?
Jimmy G is the first one that comes to everybody's mind, but the 49ers are in a perfect position. Like Brady said, they've got an insurance policy. Do they want to give that up after just seeing one game of Trey Lance? Maybe they want to see how this thing plays out a little bit longer. The other thing they have is a massive amount of leverage. I mean, everybody knows the Cowboys are desperate right now, and they're going to ask, you want Jimmy G, what are you giving us? And it's going to be a steep price for them to pay. So I don't know if that makes sense. It feels obvious, but maybe it's a little bit too high of a price. The options are not great. Like, you're sitting there looking at other rosters like a Mason Rudolph, who just got demoted to third string. And the Steelers, I do think one of the things that was interesting about that depth chart early, they had him listed as the backup, and then everybody freaked out and was like, what's wrong with Kenny Pickett? Then they dropped him down to third string. I think the Steelers did that to try to make Mason Rudolph look more attractive in the trade market. So I think that's a team you call. They're probably looking to move on from Mason Rudolph. You might be able to get him a little bit better value, but is he a good quarterback? That still remains very much in question. The other thing is possibly calling up the Saints and calling up a guy named Andy Dalton, who knows this system, played in Mike McCarthy's system a couple years ago. The Saints, Jameis has looked good, but he was hurt coming off an ACL. They might be willing to part ways with him and go a younger route behind Jameis. But at least he's somebody who can come in and execute your system, is familiar with calling the plays. Again, Andy Dalton, he's played a lot of football, but how much is left on him? I'm not so sure. And then there's one other name that's on the street that you could call. Carolina did it last year. A couple other teams have. Is Cam Newton. Like, he is a big body quarterback who's played in this league, he'll sell tickets, that's for sure. And maybe you could work him in the run game and actually, utilize some of his skill set as a physical runner. But again, somebody who's taken a huge toll on his body, you worry about his health then in that aspect. So those are 3 options. But I think even as we kick around these ideas, this looks like the Cowboys set them up for failure by not having a better backup in place.
Mason Rudolph is another name that I think Danny had initially thrown in before the show in some of his notes. He would make some sense. He's sitting number 3 on the Pittsburgh Steelers depth chart right now. Had a good preseason. Obviously familiar with that portion of the country, being an Oklahoma State quarterback. A couple other names. Nick Foles, we've obviously seen him win a Super Bowl before. He's sitting as a backup up in Indianapolis with Frank Reich. And Sam Ehlinger had a great preseason. I think so much so they kept him on the roster he's a guy that could legitimately back up Matt Ryan, and obviously Nick Foles isn't the future there in Indianapolis. So he'd be a name that I would consider, and I think you could maybe get him at a fair price. And then the other one on my list is Gardner Minshew. Like, this is a guy that I just think we have underestimated. I know Pete's never been a fan of him, but if you actually comb through the numbers, he almost has a 4 touchdown to 1 interception ratio. He's completed 63% of his passes. He'd be a guy that I think would come in with some moxie, with some fire, and whether it's just for this period of time while Dak's out, or even to be a more legitimate backup moving forward, it makes a lot of sense. The only problem with trying to get a guy like Minshew is I think the Eagles like him, and I think they would have a hard time parting ways with him because of how much they're going to run Jalen Hurts. If week 1 is any indication as far as what that ground game is going to look like, given Hurts' athleticism, but how much they want him to run the football, he could get hurt too, so they might need Gardner Minshew. But he's another one that I would definitely kick the tires on and see if it'd be worthwhile bringing in.
They want to hold on to him. The 49ers want to hold on to Jimmy G. Not looking good for the Dallas Cowboys as of right now. We'll see if they make a move sooner rather than later. Danny and Brady, hang on just a second here. So speaking of the Cowboys and their postseason chances here, talking about with and without Dak Prescott there to win the division, to repeat as champs of the NFC East, 29% down to 15%. Playoff chances plummet 20% from 56 down to 36. Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ on this Monday, your football happy hour. Week 1 almost in the books, just 1 game to go. But we are going to take a look back on the games we did see in Week 1. Let's start with the team that impressed you the most.
I'm going to start off with the Miami Dolphins. A lot of hype this offseason with the addition of Tyreek Hill and what this offense could be. I know they got off to a slow start, but they picked it up, took care of business, nothing to worry about. Took care of the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick, who came down an extra day early just to adjust to the heat and all that they would have, well, that would entail there in the Hard Rock Stadium. But at the end of the day, Tua delivered. You know, it wasn't necessarily the most prolific performance, but he got the job done. The Dolphins are 1-0, and I think as of right now, you can start to believe the hype about this team potentially being a playoff team.
Danny, what about you?
I was fired up, too, as a Dolphins fan growing up to see them have some excitement around it. Amanda, I don't know if you know this. I am captain of the Kirk Cousins fan club, so I might be biased in this one, but I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Rodgers, even before that game, was calling out all these other teams in the division, thinking like they had a chance, but he always ends up on top, and they have dominated the division the last few years. And Minnesota needing that kind of impressive win to kind of, new coach in place that they brought in there specifically for Kirk Cousins. But even more so than Kirk Cousins was Justin Jefferson, who I'm sure has kind of been getting tired of Jamar Chase and other young receivers getting a lot of attention. Man, did he step up to the plate. That 189-yard performance, 2 touchdowns. He was phenomenal. And then Zadarius Smith, who signed with the Vikings, and he specifically said so he could face the Packers twice a year. You just knew this game meant a lot. A division rival, Week 1, getting off to a strong start, new head coach, all these new pieces in place, and I thought they delivered. And I know there were a couple, passes that were missed from the Packers, but Aaron Rodgers also never looked real comfortable. He was getting harassed. They did have the big stops when they needed him at the end of the game. So I thought the Vikings, for me, were a team to watch out for, and maybe there's a changing of the guard at the top of that division.
It was reminiscent of last year, Week 1, for the Green Bay Packers versus the New Orleans Saints.
38-3.
Yeah. How'd that one turn out, though, the rest of the season?
Would you like to be
That's right.
Let's talk about the team that disappointed you the most. You're going to the other side of that.
Yeah, I'm going to Green Bay. And that's part of the reason why I bring that up is, the Aaron Rodgers line, relax, all right? The reality is they looked bad offensively. We knew that, though, right? They were replacing Devonta Adams, haven't quite found who that guy is going to be. Jenkins was out. Bakhtiari was out. Allen was
it bad or was it
out.
Concerning?
It was more concerning for me, I think, with the defense. I thought this really coming into it was going to be the best defense they've had since they won a Super Bowl. And when you have Justin Jefferson go off the way he did, almost 200 yards receiving on his own, that's a problem. The rest of it, I think we kind of came to expect, and we knew there might be some growing pains. I'm not sure if Rodgers can throw a better ball, though, to start the game to Christian Watson that he just dropped. That was a for sure touchdown, unless he hits his head on the goalpost and drops the ball. But the concern for me is the defense. And if they can't improve that side of the ball while they're going through this learning curve with those young wide receivers and new wide receivers on the outside, that could be the concerning part as far as what Green Bay is able to do in the NFC North.
Danny, team that disappointed you the most, you're looking at Titans, Giants there. I will argue the Giants had the best postseason celebration. Didn't know Brian Dable could move like that. But Danny, why were the Titans so disappointing?
It was the movement, not the rapping you liked?
All of it together. All of it together. What do you think, Danny?
I love the Giants. I was thinking about putting them as one of the most impressive. But for me, it was more about a Titans letdown at home. And the way the game started, they got off to a 13-0 lead where it was at halftime. And you just feel like this should be a game that they put a Sharpie as a W in there. And yet they just allowed the Giants to creep back in. They let Saquon Barkley run all over that defense. And then at the end of the game, they actually found their safe. Ryan Tannehill is probably going to get a lot of blame. The Titans fans don't like him because the way the playoffs unfolded last year puts him in a position to win, and they missed the field goal to potentially win the game there. I thought that was a tough loss for Tennessee to come out in I still thought they were the favorite to win the division. I know the Colts are, but I thought the Titans still wouldn't go anywhere. Derrick Henry gets rocked like we haven't seen him get rocked as an NFL player. One of the bigger hits that's out there that went viral during that game, but from Tate Crowder. But it was a disappointing loss to lose like a team like that, blow a lead, come back, and then lose it again with a missed field goal. I look at that one and I say, man, that's rough. But you know what? Brady brings something up when he said Aaron Rodgers like RELAX. I think we could say that to so many different fan bases and so many different teams because, yeah, it feels awful for the Titans, but it is such a marathon of a season. It is not a sprint. There's so many overreactions by us, and you kind of have to take a deep breath and say, all right, let's go back to the drawing board. And there's not a preseason. Like these teams hardly play their starters at all. A lot of these teams are still getting their players up in football shape, football ready, getting ready to the speed of the game and learning new systems. So I think it is a reminder to all these fan bases that might feel down and out today. Take a deep breath. It's a long season. Nobody's out of the playoffs just yet.
That was one of the things that stood out to me with that particular game was if you go back and watch the 2-point conversion, yeah, gutsy to make that call. But there are two Titans players sitting there ready to make the tackle. And Saquon Barkley just made a ridiculous play to get in the end zone. We're giving the Giants all this credit. It's like, well, if they just tackle a little better, we're not having this conversation. Or if Bullock just makes his kick. I mean, either way, no one needs to overreact right now based on the outcome of that game, even Giants fans for that matter.
I didn't know that he was rapping. I've now tried to look it up. I just saw the dance there. All right,
it was
not
the rapping that went along with it. That was what made him kind of like a little swag, kind of look cool.
Okay, I'm gonna. So look, we're not gonna overreact on a Monday. You did say though, when it comes to the Dolphins, a little bit impressed. We asked each of you for a quarterback breakdown. Danny, we're gonna start with you because sure enough, you're looking at Tua.
Yeah, that 4th and 7, which I do think is getting a lot of credit, even though it was sort of in a no man's land place. Like, what are you going to do? Punt from there? Why not just go for it? But I do think the execution was something that stood out with Tua there on 4th and 7, right up the middle, right up the heart of that Patriots defense for me. And you see, they look like they're showing pressure on the outside. The receiver in the slot's got a nice release, pushes him vertically up the field. Tua reads this perfectly, and the safety is going to come up to try to blow it up. But that's the one thing Tua has been doing better. Quick decisions, pinpoint accuracy, showcasing that you don't have to have an absolute cannon to be able to throw it 70 yards, even holds the safety. Do you see that? Just look to the left there, just to hold the defense where it was, rifle it in there perfectly in stride, which is what Mike McDaniel predicted when early this offseason. He said, we're going to yak teams to death. We're going to get those yards after catch. That's a perfect example right there in a crunch time before the half. Instead of 10-0, it's 17-0. They got this massive relief off their chest. So I thought that was one of the plays of the weekend.
Brady, your quarterback breakdown?
I'm actually going to go with the team that lost. However, if you look at the first half and second half, you got to be hard not to be impressed by the response by Joe Burrow. When you throw 4 interceptions in a game, you have a fumble as well, 5 turnovers total. It's tough to be able to still find your team and a chance to win the football game. And if you take a look at this throw down towards the end, you don't see this very often. Take a look. Jamar Chase is going to run a quick out at the goal line. You almost never see this. This is all the only thing that matters here is timing and getting the ball out in the perfect spot. Otherwise, that DB can undercut it, and it's a pick six going the other way. Game over, no chance here. But look at the ball placement. Look at the timing, gets his head around, ball's there. And then Jamar Chase is able to do the rest. I mean, this is something, Danny, when you break down some of the throws and kind of where the NFL is evolving to right now, it's just things you didn't used to see in the passing game. You know, coaches looked at it as that's way too much risk for the reward. Usually you see a guy just run a fade, runs a slant, something else that's not necessarily as much risk adverse for what you can see from the DB. But it goes to show you the type of timing and rhythm those two have and the chemistry they've had coming from LSU to the Bengals. And that's one of the reasons why they were even in that game, considering how bad their first half really was.
So let's take a look ahead to week 2. What team do you think is facing the most pressure?
To me, it's Carolina. And you just opened with the Cleveland Browns. So much was made about Baker Mayfield taking on his former team. But the reality is you have a head coach in Matt Rule who's on the hot seat. And you had that lead and you gave it up at the very end of the game. And so you start off once again, your 0-1 football team searching for a win. Now you have to go to New York to play on the Giants, who are playing with a lot of energy, a lot of swag, with a new head coach, getting a nice victory on the road, as we just talked about, against the Tennessee Titans. Saquon Barkley looks to be back to his old health. Sterling Shepard's playing the way he's hoping to, and Daniel Jones seems much better suited for this Brian Daboll offense. You lose this one, you go 0-2. I think there might be some impatience on the part of their owner, David Tepper, and how they feel about Matt Rule and this Panthers team moving forward. So that's a spot where there's a lot of pressure on the Carolina Panthers to try to get a win.
Danny, who do you say?
I'm looking at the team the Dolphins beat. The dynasty of the New England Patriots, which has been, rapidly just eroding away. They have the week 1 loss. It wasn't pretty. They were held scoreless at halftime. Bill Belichick, I think, got way too cute by naming a defensive line coach and Matt Patricia and a special teams coach and Joe Judge as his offensive coordinators. He's handing over the offense to those two guys, and a quarterback who had a really good rookie season. He exceeded way further than I thought he would play. And now you're looking at potentially a setback for him. So I think there's a ton of pressure on them. Bill Belichick is 6-7 against the AFC East opponents since Tom Brady left town. Now they have to go on the road against the Steelers, who are playing with a lot of confidence now all of a sudden. Now, the TJ Watt loss will make a difference in this one, but it almost feels like a must-win game because of the caliber of the opponent. You should win this game, even though it is on the road. But if they don't, man, there's going to be some frustrated Patriots fans. And I don't know if they are necessarily a lock to win this game. And now Mac Jones has back spasms, so he's going to be playing through pain as well. I think it's a really pressure-packed situation for the Patriots.
And we'll keep you updated on that injury here on HQ. Brady, Danny, you guys hang on just a second. Chris Hassel going to slide on in here, but I do want to mention the Pick 6 podcast this season. Everything you need to know about the NFL. Latest episode, Will Brinson, Ryan Wilson, John Breach reacting to all of the games on Sunday. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.